Today, I'm meeting with the founder and director of GDR Creative Intelligence, Kate Ancketill.
Thank you, Raymond.
So maybe you can let us know a little bit of the origins of GDR, why it came to be, and why the information you provide is so seriously considered by these organizations.
Well, slightly unusually, we were founded in London 16 years ago, originally only to select designers and architects for our clients. So, say for example, Unilever would come to us all those years ago when I was just a little young person, because I've been there for 12 years, to put together their packaging roster, for example. So we would have to look at all of the good packaging agencies, in that case in Europe, and say, well, these are the best ones. The ones you've got are not quite what you need, and so we suggest that you amend and slightly change the constituency of your creative roster.
Is it fair to say that what was unique and remains unique about you is that in many ways you are an indifferent resource, meaning that you judge the caliber of design based upon its merit?
Absolutely, we are completely and utterly, and I promise you, with my ex-Amnesty International background, totally independent and impartial. We accept no money, ever, in any way, shape or form, not even lunches really, from the creative industries. So we don't really care who wins any project, and we still select designers and architects and marketeers for pretty much all of our clients worldwide. I mean, not, obviously they do their own selection, but they pretty much all also have us assist in putting together shortlists of, say for example, it's a cosmetics company doing a new flagship store, and they want to open a store in Paris and one in London and one in, I don't know, Brazil, and they'll ask us for 3 shortlists in each of those cities. Who are the best agencies that fulfill certain criteria? And we'll put together 3 shortlists, maybe 4 or 5 agencies in each one. It's just, here you go, we think these are the best people based on our 16 years of experience. Then you take it from there, and we don't care who wins because nobody pays us. We're doing that as a service to our client, who is the brand.
In terms of a real collaboration, which is a lot of where my philosophy comes from, you do connect these creative resources based upon not necessarily their size. It could be a small design agency, it could even be an individual, but it's based upon the input with the client, in some cases even taking into consideration their financial parameters. Is that still part of the...
Absolutely. I mean, usually the client will say, we want somebody of this kind of size, in this kind of location, and this kind of skill set. I mean, that's the basic, obvious criteria, but often we'll say, right, well, we know this client and we know their personality and we know how they work, and we just know they won't get on with those guys over there because their methodologies are too different. So we will put in some of our own judgment as to which personalities will get on, and also we will have, you know, an idea of budget, and quite often they're quite small, which is why we tend to specialise in finding smaller, less well-known creatives. We certainly have discovered quite a few really up-and-coming people when they were tiny when we met them. Like, we were engaged by Virgin Atlantic, I remember, 12 years ago or something, when I just arrived at GDR, and they asked us to select the agencies for their lounge in Heathrow Airport, which is now, you know, it's known to be one of the best lounges. We selected a very, you know, tiny, completely unknown agency called Softroom, and they've been working with them ever since, and Softroom are now, you know, pretty well known, and I think that was an iconic case study for them. More recently, we were asked by O2, which is a mobile, you know, it's like Vodafone. O2 in the UK now sponsor the Millennium Dome, which is now called the O2, which is Europe's biggest, you know, entertainment centre, massive, you know, concert hall. And they used us to put together the shortlist for agencies to design the O2 branded parts of, you know, the dome. So it was their store, their bars, their hangout spaces. They wanted it all to be incredibly cutting edge because obviously, you know, they're sponsoring this dome and it's all this fantastic interiors. And we put together a really cutting edge list for them, 4 or 5 agencies internationally, Japan, New York, London, and they went with Jordan Parnas Design Associates, JDPA, here in New York. And, you know, they're well known, but they were not well known in London at that time. And they've done really well with that project. The client was very happy. They've now done another project for them in Ireland. And, you know, tiny little company now with an international client list. So we're just delighted when that happens, because we'd love to, you know, do well by doing good, dare I say, by giving something back to the creative industries, because we don't charge any creative anything ever. So any work that they win is always free, and that's our thank you to them for, you know, sending us their creativity, which we then cover in our quarterly reports, which we then expose to our clients, and hopefully those clients will also pick up the phone and contact those agencies. So that's why it's a kind of virtuous circle, and what comes around goes around.
As I followed your career and followed the success of GDR, something I've delighted in is that you've been able to maintain that very sort of personal relationship and translate that into perhaps a broader reach that can reach more clients, because obviously your client roster has expanded, and also found its way into some products and product services, such as a report, such as your personalized visits. Maybe you could discuss a little bit how that operates and how you conduct that.
This is the current Global Innovation Report, which we publish quarterly, and each cover is different because we have different agency design each one. They have complete carte blanche, so they're all sort of staggeringly gorgeous, and it's always a surprise to me as to what it's going to look like every quarter.
So pretty. So
yeah, your favourite colour.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's big, so we do a lot every quarter. The research team are, you know, working themselves half to death to get this done every quarter.
Amazing.
But as you can see, it's a lot of environments, but also we have articles by some of the world's top thinkers and marketeers and creatives, and we always have an article about some region of the world. So at the moment we're talking about what's happening in the Middle East. We have another article by the ad agency Mother talking about branded or unbranded entertainment, and that's I mean, just a fantastic case study. If I can just sort of go off on one for a second, is the film that they created recently called Somerstown. And Somerstown is a really run-down area of London just by King's Cross. And the film was sponsored by Eurostar, which is the train company that goes from Paris to London. And so it's a 2-hour proper feature film. You know, it's been in cinemas. It's you know, a real story. And it's just set around these 2 young kids from the wrong side of the tracks. One of them falls in love with a waitress from Paris, and she goes back home on the Eurostar, and the kids follow her to find their real love. In exit interviews, the people who went to see the film, the questions to them were, did you see any kind of branded content? No. Did you think that the film had been paid for by an advertiser? No. Were you thinking of going to Paris on the Eurostar anytime soon? Yes. Everyone said, yeah, that looks great, because that just looks so easy and much better than flying. Yeah, we were thinking of going to Paris on the Eurostar. So, you know, Mother did a brilliant job there. I mean, job done. That's the advertising done. But that was a real film with a real director and no obvious branded content in it whatsoever. And that's an article that's been written by them here, talking about how advertising must not interrupt the interesting entertainment. Advertising must be equally entertaining as the entertainment. And I do think that's a way that, you know, TV advertising certainly is going to have to go, but all sorts of other advertising. You know, you have to touch the consumer in a way that delights them and surprises them, and things move so fast that all consumer touchpoints have to be innovative these days. HSBC recently did, on the back of their ATM receipts, they had little origami pictures that related to their services. So you get a little origami pig when it's to do with savings, or a little origami house that you could put together when it's to do with mortgages. Now, you know, there's loads of boring collateral out there that brands have to have. You know, the receipts, the swing tags, you know, all sorts of stuff that is just dull. And we're trying to show them ways of making that exciting, just using great design innovation, not necessarily in an expensive way, but in a way that just delights their customer, builds the brand, and reminds them that that brand is distinctive and unique, and you like it, and it gives you a warm, furry feeling inside. I mean, that's the job.
Well, you know, not to self-plug my book, but I will. And my subtitle is, you know, collaboration plus innovation equals customer fascination. because I think the difference between fascination and manipulation is huge, but they can accomplish the same things, but in an ethical way. And I think what you're suggesting is there is absolutely nothing wrong with delighting people. And if that delight should predispose a consumer towards one brand or another, and it hasn't been done in a misleading way, then frankly it's win-win. Now, the big question is, and obviously I don't think we should skip over the physical as well, the Levi's store that didn't have a Levi's on it, whereas in the US, Levi's have been struggling. In Europe, where they had a store, and this was one of your case studies, that sold objects that were relevant to that age group. At that time, it was iPods, skateboards, what have you, and Levi's just happened to be in the store. Would you say that that's another example of that sort of unbranded branding that you accomplished, except in a retail setting?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Levi's and Adidas do the same thing, and we've just actually covered very recently a case study of theirs in Berlin, which is a store which changes every 3 months, and it's completely unrecognizable from 3 months to the next.
I was part of that.
You were part of that? Oh, well, fantastic.
Yeah, okay,
well, we just covered that in the report. And at the moment, it looks like a Turkish bazaar. And 3 months ago, it was a Yohji Yamamoto.
Oh, yeah.
And you had to kind of like really delve in there to find anything that was Adidas. But if you were the cool set of kids and you kind of were in the know, because it wasn't very well, it's sort of guerrilla marketing, isn't it? You've got to know that it's there and be cool to be have that available to you. And it's also about hunting. It's making the chase more exciting, and the product that you're actually finding in the end is more desirable because you have to work for it, essentially. But yes, I think that for Adidas and Nike, there are parts of the world right now where it's not particularly cool to be a big American corporate brand, I'm sorry to say, but that's simply the way it is. And smart, big corporate American brands who want to reach those, hard to reach, very discerning, kind of fashion focused youth markets sometimes have to be a bit innovative by perhaps pretending that they're not a big American corporate, and by assimilating themselves with the local culture and fusing and merging with what's happening locally. And I think that was what was very clever about the Adidas and also the Levi's in London a few years ago. Because they wanted to, tune in with what was there locally. And we just covered last quarter a whole theme on global local. So, big entities looking small in all of the countries around the world where they exist, because only a smaller entity usually has the energy and the savvy to really integrate with local culture. But I think that argument has been won. I mean, big global brands, even the likes of Coke, they are very much tailored to all of the particular markets that they're in, because if they don't do that, then they tend not to, win the trust of the local population.
I mean, I know, again, this was you are years ahead of your time, but you sort of foretold this when you were discussing large, what we call in America, big box stores, incorporating local sections within them to sort of identify and differentiate their stores from everyone that's located everywhere else. Architectural design firm called Avrico, I know they're involved with a restaurant that every season completely redecorates, completely changes the menu, which sort of challenges the concept that a brand concept is a stagnant thing that needs to be protected forever. I mean, it could be a brand's ability to change that defines it. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a reflection of the reality of what's out there. There maybe used to be perhaps a 2, 3, 4 year cycle for example, revamping the interior of a store. Now it's much less than that, possibly a year. And obviously that's very expensive, and we want to be eco-friendly. Most of our brands want to be eco-friendly, so they don't want to completely throw everything out once a year and totally redesign everything. That would be inappropriate in the modern day. But you need to build in a modular way so that things can be consistently re-engineered without extreme cost and so on. So the smart brands are doing that, and all the smart brands, but all of them are engaging with local art and culture, and of course this is a major area of interest for you. And part of our job actually is to just connect them to those creative communities if they're not already deeply ingrained, which most of them are anyway.
If you look at projected media expenditures in the United States, the only one projected to hold its own or even increase this year was in the area of innovation. And a comment I've made, maybe a bit controversially, is it's a sad state of affairs that people have to outsource innovation. What I love about the service you provide is it's inspiration that allows people working within organizations to make that creative leap themselves. And and what you do provide, obviously, and it's part of this, is you provide direct contact information. There's nothing hidden. There's no hidden fees. If they're inspired by something you say, they can utilize that resource. So perhaps, as we wind up our interview, you can talk directly as to how a person would contact you, what sorts of packages or are there levels of services you provide, and perhaps a little bit about some of the general trend areas you'll be focusing on.
We only actually sell our services, as you know, to global consumer brands. And the reason for that is, and we would love to sell them to the ad agencies and the design agencies and so on, but we can't for two reasons. One is when a case study is sent in to us by a designer that we got to know because we saw some little snippet of their work in a magazine and we phoned them up in Brazil or Sao Paulo or New York or wherever, and we said, we love your work. Could we put it in our innovation report, or perhaps the next thing that you do, because we only cover things that are younger than 6 months since launch. And they say, oh, okay, yeah, we'll send it in. And we say, no, look, there's no charge, honestly, there's no downside to this. And when we put your work in our report and we, obviously analyze it, put it into trends and showcase it to our clients, the upside is that, Sony or Nike or, Kraft might phone you up and give you a job, and that's completely free to you, costs you nothing, no downside. The upside for the fact that they can't then buy the reports is that their competitors also can't buy it. So the little guy who's often the small designer or perhaps the sole practitioner or whatever who sends us their work knows that other competitive agencies will not be able to purchase his work and, shall we say, take inspiration from it, that it will only be seen by some big client that's likely to pick up the phone and say, hey, I loved your work, would you like to come and talk to us about a project? So it is an avenue of new business for all of the contributors who go in there. So that's the upside. Sorry, you can't buy it, but hey, there you go. We contact all of those agencies. There's currently about 2,000 on the active list worldwide, and we constantly go back to them and say, what's your latest, newest work? Please send it in. And if we think it's conceptually innovative enough and we think it indicates a macro trend, then we'll put it in the report and show it to our clients. Our clients actually are very busy people, and they usually don't have time to actually read the report cover to cover, which is why we go in and present it to them in an hour in a very narrative form. We tell the story of what's happening in the world that quarter to all of our clients all over the world. So that's why we travel.
When you talk macro trend, can you give us an example of a current or previous, that would be an umbrella?
Absolutely.
That you would present to a client?
Well, there's one that we're just still quite excited about, and it takes quite a lot to excite us, obviously. And this was covered last quarter, so I can give you it because it's one back. It's a tiny little shop in Bloomsbury called the School of Life, and it's just got a poster in the window, and you look in, you think, what are they selling? It's quite confusing. But anyway, they are a cultural apothecary, and they are selling culture. So that's in the form of courses on things like love. And obviously they got lots of coverage last weekend with the Valentine's thing. You would go for a weekend course to discuss love. And, philosophically, politically, personally, what it means to you, where you're going, what are your issues. It's a philosophy class, basically. There are other courses on work, politics, play. And it's so popular that it only opened, I don't know, last October or something, and it's booked up now until June. in the worst recession that we've had in living memory, but it's still booked up because it's part of a macro trend. I mean, this has definitely hit the zeitgeist. People are feeling very unstable. They don't know what's happening around the corner. They don't know what's happening with their job, with their mortgage. I mean, you know the story. I don't need to depress us anymore. But what is, I think, solid or can be solid in people's lives is their internal life, their connection to the community and to other people, their meeting of like-minded individuals in their neighbourhood, the discussion of philosophy, the understanding of more of the self and what makes us human. These things last through good times and bad.
The macro trend is a search for meaning and connection.
Absolutely.
And that has manifestations across retail and not just what people are considering new media, social media, etc. So you would then identify sort of that kind of an area and show then how it's trickling down into every sort of commercial application
Absolutely.
or consumer touch point.
Entirely. I mean, all big brands are looking for ways to provide a forum for consumers to speak to each other, because they understand it's no longer about brands communicating from the brand to the consumer. It's about consumers talking about the brands.
As a brand, GDR has evolved in a way that's consistent with your basic philosophy, but that doesn't mean everything about you has remained static. And so for being able to practice what you preach and for your great success, I want to thank you for being my guest today. And I look forward to seeing what comes next.
Thank you very
you.
much.